Welcome into ProBox TV. As you know, here at ProBox, we go over news about ProBox fighters and ProBox fights. In our boxing scene show, we talk about boxing news. Every now and then, those things intersect in a dramatic way. For people who don't know what happened, Lamont Roach Jr., a ProBox TV fighter, fought Gervonta Davis last Saturday, got a majority draw in a fight in which he was a massive underdog. The controversy in round number 9 is around a knockdown that didn't happen. That's right, a knee by Gervonta Davis that was not reflected by the referee or on the scorecards themselves and dramatically changed the outcome of the fight. Well, this is being litigated in many ways. Number one, in an appeal filed by Gary Jonas, who is, of course, the owner here at ProBox TV, on behalf of his fighter, seeking to overturn the result in the ring. From a draw to, of course, a knockout, TKO, or disqualification. We will go over all of that. And joining me here in the studio and on Zoom are the experts who will help me decide everything. Jimmy Smith, alongside, of course, the champs, Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi, and joining us via Zoom, we have Jack Reiss, referee extraordinaire, Dan Rafael, outstanding boxing journalist and boxing mind, and also Stephen Edwards from Boxing Scene. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Let's get right down to it. The controversy in last Saturday's fights, of course, circling around a knockdown in round number 9 that was not scored as such. You can see here from the suit itself, the complaint filed by Gary Jonas, that the knockdown in round number 9, Tank Davis, his knee and glove touched the canvas, which should have been ruled a knockdown. Therefore, a 10-8 round for Lamont Roach Jr. Now, this is what is alleged in the suit, but visually, we can all see it. This is a replay from round number 9. You see the punches by Lamont Roach Jr., a right hand, boom, that lands, and then 2 jabs after that. And you see a jab on the eye. Tank Davis turns to the referee and kneels. Gentlemen, here in studio, fairly clear that knee touches, that's a knockdown. I don't know how else you can see it. And when people talk about the delay, well, there's a delay. We've seen much worse delay, especially on body shots. Someone takes a body shot, backs up, and in several seconds, then they take a knee. And people take knees for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes you're under assault and you need a break. Yeah. It's all a knockdown.
Jimmy, we've seen, if I think of fights in the past where voluntary knees have happened, you know, off of not one single moment or one single punch. You think of Mayweather against Carlos Famoso Hernandez. When he lands the punch and turns his back and takes a knee, he gets counted. You think of Miguel Cotto against Antonio Margarito, where, you know, it was under duress and he just took that knee. And, of course, my compadre right here, Chris Algieri against Ruslan Provodnikov as well. It wasn't a particular shot. You feel something, you feel discomfort, you take a knee. All those times, there's a count, dude. I mean, and I'll tell you what, Steve Willis also knew there was a count because he started counting and then stopped.
Yeah, we'll get to it. There's more than one pillar of this defense for Lamont Roach Jr., but the first one's a knockdown, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, we have a ton of experts on the panel today. I'm going to speak from a fighter standpoint, just like you did, champ. You know, and you can argue whether that right hand landed clean or if it landed hard or how hard those jabs were. It doesn't matter. Champ, when you mentioned when I took that knee against Ruslan Provodnikov, I actually didn't get hit. I was still recovering from the last knockdown when my orbital was damaged. My eye was damaged. My vision was impaired. I gave ground so I would keep my opponent off me, and I still couldn't see. So I took a knee, understanding very well that as soon as I took that knee, I was going to get a count. Yeah. And I had 8 to 9 seconds to get up, and I had more time to get my vision back, which it did, thank God.
And Mayweather didn't get hit either. He threw the punch.
Yeah, he actually landed left on Famoso, Hernandez.
So, you know, this is standard procedure here, guys.
Yeah, and we got to see, the question I have to ask, I got to start with Jack Reiss. Is there something we are, as fans, aren't seeing about this knockdown that changes it? Because me, as a fan, I saw a knockdown in round number 9. What's your thought?
Well, when I agreed to come on, you know, I'm regulated by an ethics agreement that I signed, so I don't want to come on and criticize or actually defend his actions or anybody's actions. What I would like to do is just lay out what the rules and regulations say and the court of public opinion, and you guys can make your own decision on what you think happened based upon what the rules and regulations are. And let me just say this, there's a difference between rules and regulations. Regulations are very strict, they're written into statute, into law. That's the operating system, and then the rules are very flexible and they help you actually do the details that work within that system. So let me just put out to you guys 3 rules of what a referee has to follow. First of all, the referee is the sole arbiter, the only person able to determine whether to stop a fight or not, and anything else that happens in a ring. The second is part of his ability to do things when fouls occur. If a boxer fouls or acts in an unsportsmanlike manner during the bout or in between rounds, the referee should admonish or disqualify the offending boxer, depending upon the severity of the offense. And number 3, talks about penalizing and points. While warnings are generally preferred, the severity of a foul can warrant the immediate point deduction without any prior warnings. So now what gives a referee the ability to call what you guys are talking about as a knockdown, I don't know if you guys know, maybe you can tell me. If not, I'll surely tell you. Do you guys know what the description of a legal knockdown is?
Anything but the soles of the feet touching the canvas, as far as I understand. Please let me know if it's something different.
It's pretty simple. A boxer will be considered a down fighter when struck by a legal blow or blows, and that's the important thing. When he's struck by a legal blow or blows, if any part of their body other than the soles of their feet touch the canvas, if the boxer is hanging helplessly on or over the ropes, or if only the ropes prevent the boxer from being knocked down. Now, I want to let you guys know there's nothing specifically written in the rules, but it is an accepted policy and practice. Came from the amateurs. Amateurs did this, and it's accepted everywhere that when a fighter gets hit and or for some reason he takes a knee, it's independently. He takes a knee or turns away from their opponent and kind of abandons the fight. It can be considered a knockdown. So in this case, with the rules, they're flexible, but the referee acted within his scope of responsibility. And I think what you guys are really going to be judging or basing this on is the referee's judgment, because he had the scope. You're going to be judging his judgment. And the most important trait of a referee is good judgment, because we don't live in a vacuum. This isn't black and white ever, in boxing especially. And you got to make good judgments and good decisions.
Jack, I think that was an excellent explanation, and I think it clears up a lot of things. But you're giving one side of it. I'm going to give you the other side of it. If it's generally applied.
Holy, I got to interrupt. I'm not giving any side of it. I'm just not.
No. But what I'm saying is, here's what I'm saying. That court of public opinion. There's the other court of public opinion as well. Because if a fighter takes a knee and isn't counted, then he's quitting. Okay, because in boxing, one thing that is not public opinion is you cannot call your own timeout in the middle of a round. That is unacceptable. It does not happen. It is not allowed to happen. So leaving it up to the referee to decide, well, was he allowed to call a timeout or not? That is taking things into account here. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can go with flexibility. We can go with it's up to the referee. What we're basically deciding is, was it up to the referee's discretion for Gervonta Davis to be allowed to call his own timeout in the middle? This isn't the NBA, dude. This is boxing. You cannot call your own timeout in the middle of a round. So if it's up to his discretion, what discretion is there aside from Gervonta Davis just called his own timeout?
I'll give you a perfect example, okay? First of all, I don't disagree with you at all in what you're saying, but there is flexibility in this, because I'll give you a different example. You guys are stating that this happened after a punch. I'm not arguing, I'm just stating the facts. What if a fighter was moving around, there were no punches involved, and he turned and he turns back and started, blinking or something like that and said, ref, I got something in my eye. Do we call that a knockdown? No, we would say, stop, time, what's wrong? Can you continue? And we would actually, instead of having the referee stop the fight on a technicality, see if we could get his eye cleared real quick and get him back to boxing. That's the kind of discretion we have. I'm not disputing what you're saying. I'm telling you there's flexibility.
The rule is also protect yourself at all times. I've had hair issues in my fight, as many people remember. There's different issues and different things. You initiate a clench. In the clench, you talk to the referee. The referee is up to the referee. Dude, I've been in clenches and told the referee, yo, watch his head or watch his elbows. The referee didn't give a shit 3/4 of the time, so I stopped arguing most of the time. Because it's a pointless conversation to have with a referee when you're in the middle of a fight. They barely do anything anyway. So, but when you're going with that argument, what are we going? And I'd like to hear your opinion, but I also like to hear the other guest's opinion too. Where do you go? I mean, you can't decide on yourself. It's got to be up to the referee to give you that timeout.
You're totally incorrect in this. I have to say it, and let me explain why. I just gave you the description. Listen, I'm not defending the ref. I'm trying to give you how we operate. And
I got 44 pro fights. I've never seen him operated this way. Go ahead.
Paulie, let me finish.
Go ahead.
I just described to you what a knockdown is. So here's a part of the discretion. You and Chris are fighting. Chris hits you with a right hand, but your right foot is caught behind his left foot, and you go down to the canvas. I have the discretion to say it's not a knockdown. By the law, by the rule, it's a knockdown. He hit you, you went down. But common sense and my discretionary abilities telling me no. Paulie didn't have a chance to pull his foot out and recapture his balance. I got to determine instantly, was that punch hard enough to put him down? So what put him down, the trip or the punch? Yeah. We have discretion like this all throughout boxing.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And I'm not arguing with you.
So, Dan, let me ask you, Dan Rafael, boxing journalist, great boxing mind. What were your thoughts sitting there watching this? What was your level of confusion? I was confused myself.
My reaction was not so much about, well, first of all, yeah, it's a knockdown. A guy landed a jab, and the man took a step back and took a knee and then ran to the corner. But while I'm processing the knockdown, guys, the thing I was thinking about, and this is in real time as I'm watching the fight, is I see his coach, Calvin Ford, come up the steps, and he's holding a white towel. So my immediate reaction was not even about the knockdown. Mine is like, what's going on? They're quitting the fight. I've been ringside for 25 years covering boxing. When you see a trainer go up the steps holding a white towel, that means they're about to toss it in and they're going to call the fight and pull their guy out. So that was my initial reaction. And to the point about whether it's a knockdown, not a knockdown, I certainly appreciate Jack Reiss's viewpoint about having discretion. And I like referees that have discretion. That's one of the things that made Jack a great referee for so long. But in this particular instance, Steve Willis, who prior to this, to my knowledge, has been a good referee, you have a referee who saw what happened, called the knockdown. He sent Lamont Roach to a neutral corner. He picked up the count from the timekeeper, and simultaneous to that, you have Gervonta Davis in the corner dealing with what he was dealing with in terms of the getting toweled off by his one of his coaches and Calvin Ford. So there was a number of errors, in my opinion, that Steve Willis made. If it's not going to be a knockdown, don't start counting and sending the opponent to the neutral corner, number one. And then beyond that, there was all kinds of issues because the man coming up, I know the unified rules of boxing. I've read the ABC rules. You are not allowed as a second to do anything other than be seated until the round is over. So when he came up the steps with the towel, that is not only grounds for a point deduction, that is grounds, if you want to be real ruthless about it, could have disqualified him. I've seen that happen, by the way. Furthermore, Gervonta Davis turned his back, which is abandoning the fight, stuck his head out of the ring, actually, between the ropes. Can't do that either. That could have been a point deduction. Then the referee was walking over to him, and Calvin Ford is toweling him off. Also, you can't be touching the fighter and giving advice during the round. There were so many opportunities for Gervonta Davis to be penalized in that instance. Steve Willis could have called a knockdown or continued to call the knockdown, could have taken a point or even a DQ for all the things I just described. He did none of it. He didn't take anything away from Gervonta Davis, and it was unfortunate because Lamont Roach should have had a knockdown. You want to litigate this, guys? We've all, I don't know, between you and me and the two fighters and Jimmy and Jack and I know we've got our other guest, Breadman. If you took all of our years combined in boxing, we're way over 100 years. I guarantee you that we've all seen tens, if not hundreds of thousands of boxing matches. That's a knockdown. End of story. Punch thrown. Jab lands, doesn't matter how hard it was. Man takes a knee. I don't know what else is there to call a knockdown on. That's a knockdown. End of story.
Well, number one, the legal profession missed out on a great mind when you went into boxing, first off. Secondly, Stephen Breadman Edwards, welcome. Thank you so much. What are your thoughts on this? Where do you fall in this controversy in terms of the discretion of the referee? Jack Reiss is totally right. The referee does have some discretion. And the idea that almost everyone who knows boxing saw a knockdown. What's your thought?
I thought it was a knockdown. I looked at it. Obviously, I was at the fight, but I was watching the fight on my phone, actually, because I was in the hospital. I was trying to figure out what punch landed to make him take a knee, to be totally honest. I couldn't tell whether it was the right hand or the jab. But when he took the knee and he started pointing to his eye and he went over to his corner, what confused me was Steve started counting. He actually started counting and then stopped himself. I don't know if somebody told him to stop or he just checked himself. It was a very confusing moment, but unfortunately, referees get paid to make split decision calls like that. it's a tough job, but that's the job that they have. And I thought it personally was a knockdown. I don't know what else to say. I thought it was a knockdown, and I just didn't understand the stopping and the starting of the count. And I think Steve, I think he made a mistake. We all make them. I think he was making some. I don't know how much discretion you can use when the guy gets hit with a shot and then takes a knee and walks to his corner. I don't. And in New York, they're very strict. I'm in the locker room and they tell you don't get out your seat. They even tell us that we're not allowed to stop the fight. That we have to contact the doctor or contact the referee, and the referee has to stop the fight. So, the corner getting out of their seats and things like that. It was just unfortunately, it was just a blown call from our perspective.
Well, let's go to that. Breadman, of course, an outstanding boxing trainer in his own right. I appreciate your insight. When you look at the second pillar of this argument, Dan Rafael brought it up, so did Breadman, the idea that there wasn't just a knockdown. He then turns his back to the fight itself, to the referee, to the fighter, to Lamont Roach Jr., who was sent to a neutral corner, right? He turns his back on the fight. In combat sports, not just in boxing, but in combat sports, period, Chris, you're a kickboxer, physical surrender. If you turn away from the fight like you don't want to continue and you walk away from it, a lot of referees don't ask you, they throw their hands up, they wave it off, it is over. So the second pillar of this argument, of this appeal, is that Gervonta Davis turned his back and physically surrendered the fight. When he turned away, walks away, you see the referee on video trying to get his attention, going, hey, where are you going? Physical surrender. Paulie, I know you want to talk about this.
And you can see Lamont has been told to go to neutral corner because as Gervonta takes a knee and then jumps back up, Lamont doesn't even attack him. Because protect yourself at all times. If you take a knee and jump back up, I'm attacking you. I can hit you. You know what I mean? It's protect yourself at all times. It's not my problem if you turn your back on me. So the fact that Lamont is arms down, relaxed, you can tell that he's been told to head to the neutral corner at this point already, as Steve is about to take the count. And Jack, I want to defer to you. I'm not arguing everybody home with Jack. Jack's a fellow New Yorker. I love Jack, and I think he's one of the best referees. Just we're debating over here. Go ahead, Jack.
That's how Paulie talks. Go ahead, Jack.
Hey, I talk the same way, and I love it. Hey, listen, I don't disagree with anything you guys are saying. I'm just trying to lay out the rules for you. So in this case, he had 5 choices or a combination of. The first one was he could have done nothing. He could have just said, get back in here and let's fight. The second choice he had was to call it a knockdown and do the appropriate things would come with a knockdown. The third choice he had is don't call it a knockdown and admonish the fighter for doing what he did. That's what he chose. The fourth choice he had was don't call knockdown, take a point for unsportsmanlike conduct, taking it upon himself to go to his corner and stick his head out the window. And then he could have taken another point from Ford, but coming up on a ring apron. The rule says during the course of a fight or a round, the cornermen are not allowed to go up the stairs or go on the apron, and they're definitely not allowed to administer assistance to their fighter. That's why we put fighters in a neutral corner. When on a knockdown, we don't want them being coached by their fighter. I just want to say one thing to you guys. Another thing. There's a lot of type of fouls. There's fouls that intentionally, willfully are trying to hurt the opponent. That's one type. This was a foul of interference. He was stalling to get away from a disadvantage, okay? So using a disqualification is a little over the top, and because we want to see the fight come to a natural conclusion. So there could have been stuff, based on what you guys saying, I think the other choices were better. To me, like a police officer taking out your gun and killing somebody, it's not a tool, it's a last resort. I'm done.
Jack, what's the rule about turning your back during a contest, though? I'm a little hazy on that. I mean, I always thought that was abandonment.
I totally agree. You're not allowed to do it, but the ref doesn't immediately call it a knockdown. The ref should say, hey, what are you doing? Don't turn your back. You do it again, the fight's over. There's a number of reasons they do it. Sometimes they do it and they grab the turnbuckle. He's hanging on his own choice. He's hanging helplessly over the ropes. You can call that a knockdown.
But Jack, you're talking about major fouls. Okay, let's go back to, like, for example, Mayweather, Victor Ortiz. Victor Ortiz leaps into a headbutt. It's a big moment, so Joe Cortez doesn't disqualify him, even though that kind of a flagrant foul can be a disqualification or a point deduction, which Cortez took. Earlier in this fight, this is why Gervonta Davis knew he had him in the bag already, because earlier in this fight, there's an intentional shoulder barge in the clinch where Gervonta literally shoulders Lamont's face in the clinch. And then Lamont reacts on the break. He just throws a little punch. And Willis warns Lamont Roach for the reaction and doesn't even acknowledge the fact that there was an intentional, because you can't do that by accident. This little shoulder march to the chin in the inside, that's on purpose. That's an automatic point. Not only does Willis not acknowledge it, he actually warned Lamont for the reaction to that. This is several rounds earlier that I'm going back to. But things build up, man. Things build up, and as fighters, we notice them. If you got the referee in your pocket, you started to realize it. Or if the referee's a little bit more strict, you start to realize it, and you start to work off that. Gervonta Davis knew he'd get away with this. That's why he did this, because he already realized this guy's kind of in my pocket. That's my opinion of it.
Now, Breadman, I want to ask you about it as a boxing trainer, as recognized as you are. A lot of the confusion we've talked about here is he starts the count and then he abandons it. Where, thank you so much, Jack Reiss, for talking about, the discretion of the referee. His discretion was a knockdown. He starts counting, then he stops, which adds to the confusion. And I'm sitting here at the desk with two fighters. I was a fighter myself. If you send me to a neutral corner, you better count, because I should be hitting that guy. Yeah. Another part of it is, if you weren't going to count, why do you send the guy to a neutral corner? As the fighter, I'm going, I should be hitting this guy if he's not down. And that confusion really added to things. Breadman, what's your thought on it?
First off, I agree with Jack about the part about the abandonment. I think that would have been a little bit harsh to disqualify Davis or make it a TKO victory for Roach. I know he turned his back, but I have seen fights, and I'm sure Paulie and Chris have seen this, where a guy's equilibrium is a little knocked off and he might turn his back for a second, but he's not really quitting. He's just a little bit messed up, and then he gets himself together. I don't know if you call that a knockout if Gervonta Davis turned his back, because I didn't view it as abandonment. Honestly, when you're watching it live, I viewed it as just confusion. And let's just be honest, with a huge event like that, with so much at stake, I don't know if you want to call a knockout right there. So I don't, technically it may be abandonment, but the word discretion is a big word. I wouldn't call it a knockout, but the fact that Steve started to count, it's 100% a knockdown. The abandonment part and saying it's a knockout, I think that might be a little bit harsh considering the circumstances.
Brad, that's why I brought up Mayweather Ortiz. Same thing, big circumstance. You don't disqualify Ortiz there, even though in a normal fight you would have, because he literally leaped like a billy goat. So I agree with you here. Same kind of situation, big moment.
Or even Zab Judah and Floyd Mayweather, where literally both corners rushed the ring, which should have been the end of the contest. But if there's discretion to allow the fight to continue, which
it's letter of the law instead of spirit of the law.
I'll give you guys a better one. Okay, when Tyson bit Holyfield,
yeah, he bit him more than once.
Hold on. When Tyson bit Holyfield, he walked over to Mark Ratner and said, "That's it, fight's over." He bit him, and Mark Ratner said to him, "Are you sure that's what you want to do, Mills?" And Mills realized the gravity of his fight, so he wanted to make it definitive. He took points away. He let it continue. The second one made it so egregious, it gave him the opportunity to stop it, and nobody complained.
Jack, who can forget Tyson pleading his case to Mills Lane and Mills going, "Bullshit, you bit him."
Everybody remembers that. Dan, I have to ask you, what we're building on here, and I think kind of the elephant in the room here, is that each one of these, as Jack Reiss says, there's a certain discretion. We'll get into the face wipe in a second. I think that's a different level here. But the first two, in combination, he took a knee, then he turned his back. No point, no warning. Together, is it more than the sum of its parts to you, Dan?
I'm still trying to figure out how it's not a knockdown. There's a professional boxing match taking place. Lamont Roach fires 3 punches. At least one of those left jabs lands. Nowhere in the rules does it mention that it has to land at a certain magnitude or a certain level of ferocity. It could just graze him or whatever. You can clearly see him blink the eye when the punch lands, and he then takes a knee. How is that anything other than a textbook knockdown? I mentioned if you took the combined years that all of us here on this panel and in the show have watched boxing, it's well over 100 years. Between us, first of all, you got Chris and Paulie who've been in championship level fights, and you got Breadman who's trained in championship fights. I have covered hundreds of championship fights. I think we all know what a knockdown is. Guy throws a punch, guy takes a knee, that's a knockdown. And by the way, the referee sent the fighter to the neutral corner and began the count. And I have yet to hear a logical explanation of what was the reason why he abandoned the count, because by the time he got into the conversation with Tank, now we could not hear what Tank was saying because he was not wearing a microphone, but Steve Willis was wearing a microphone, and he basically was like, "What are you doing?" And then, there was some back and forth between them, and you can hear clearly, and I've listened to this several times, you hear Steve Willis say, "I understand," something to the effect of, "You can't do that, it looks like a knockdown." And my perspective is, why it looks like a knockdown, guys? Because it's a knockdown.
Very true.
And then he just let them. By the way, and at this moment in time, we don't know until after the fight why he did what he did, claiming the burning sensation in his eyes. So we don't know that for for a number of more minutes, until after the fight is over with. So you're left to scratch your head, go, what the heck is going on? And we haven't even got into all the nonsense that happened with the supposed replay.
Now, what I want to bring up is the hardest one. When you talk about discretion, and Jack Reiss, I would love to hear your opinion about this. When you talk about referees' discretion, the corner is not allowed to touch, treat, interact with a fighter at all unless the referee says so. Jack, as you pointed out, if a guy says, "Hey, I've got something in my eye," sometimes a cornerman can help wash it out. The referee has to guide all of that. The moment that Gervonta Davis stuck his head between the ropes, got his face wiped off, and we'll go into the reasons in a second, which I think also kind of defy logic a little bit. How does referees' discretion deal with this in any way? Do they simply have discretion about the penalty, but there should have been some penalty? Please talk me through this, Jack, because as a fan, I found this incomprehensible. I don't know of any circumstance in which you can walk to your corner and have them do anything to you at all. Please.
I'm not disputing anything you said. And I said there were choices he had, and two of the choices were to admonish in some way, whether it's verbally, points, or DQ, which would have been like Breadman said, would have been outrageous. He could have addressed both Gervonta or Coach Ford for coming up on the apron by the rules. He could have done that.
The famous fight. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey guys,
Please,
I want to
Breadman.
say one thing. I think Paulie and Chris are going to understand where I'm coming from with this, what I'm about to say. People make mistakes, right? And I don't have a horse in the race. I don't really know Gervonta Davis, and I'm pretty cool with Roach, but we're not like personable. But this always happens to favor the A side.
Yes.
And
Man, you read my mind, dude. Read my mind.
90%. And I want to just say this because I'm cool with Steve Willis. I like Steve Willis. I
know him
think
as the
he's
amateurs.
excellent. I think he's an excellent referee.
Agreed.
And I think that I don't want to like.
Lost control.
I really think that the moment just shocked him. And sometimes we all can have this indecisiveness and big moments. But my biggest problem with boxing overall, this is not a Steve Willis thing, and I want to be clear when I say that because I really like him and I think he's a good referee. But the magnitude of this controversy goes up because it always favors the A-side fighter. And then when you're looking on the outside from an objective point of view, you're saying, why is it the guy that brings the money to the table? Why isn't the guy who's supposed to win? Why is it always the guy whose name is first on the headlines? I see you smiling, Jack, and I think you're a great referee too. But I'm telling the truth. It always favors that guy. That's the biggest problem that I have.
But man, it's no different in professional football. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, and you can go each sport.
But that's how you
Jack,
lose fans.
Jack,
I don't watch the NFL because of that crap anymore.
Hey, Jack, listen. You're right.
I'm not agreeing with it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's there.
Hey, Jack, listen. The Eagles should have beat them in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. I lost a ton of money on that game.
Yeah, that pass interference call, remember? Yeah, absolutely.
That was a bullshit call, Jack. But let's just talk about boxing because that's how we all make a living. Even as a referee, I know you guys have this speech in the dressing room. You always say, we don't have a dog in the race. We could care less who wins the fight. And I'm not saying Steve did. Again, I think Steve is an excellent referee. But I know Chris and Paulie have a problem with this. And as a trainer of a guy who's come in most of my big fights as a trainer on the B side, the A side always gets that. That's the biggest problem I have with this. Not so much the call, but why is it the A side always gets the benefit of the round?
I want to better piggyback off you. I am willing to bet all kinds of farmland that if Lamont Roach took that knee, he would have got counted. If that was you, if you would have flipped sides, if that was Lamont Roach taking a knee just like it happened, can you do that again just the way he did it? You know, and if Lamont's father comes up and wipes his eye, I would be willing to pay all kinds of farmland. It wouldn't have been handled that way.
Dan, I got to ask you, as a boxing journalist, the optics for boxing, as Breadman said, aren't good. You know, the first thing I thought, Paulie, same thing I thought when I was watching, I go, Lamont Roach does that, that's a knockdown, period. And if he goes to his corner and gets his face wiped off, he gets disqualified. It is absolutely over. So this idea of the optics for boxing, Dan, they're not good in that sense. I think Breadman's 100% correct.
I agree with Breadman. It's terrible. And here's the point I tried to make earlier. There were a multitude of moments and issues that occurred during the sequence where Steve Willis would have been well within his rights, his job, frankly, not just his rights, but his mandate to take a point at the very least. Now, I agree with everybody that a disqualification was too harsh and should not have been done. I was only making the point that it was one of the things that was available to him to handle the situation. But if you call the knockdown, he's going to get penalized the point on the judges' scorecards. If you call a point deduction for turning your back, if you call a point deduction for going to the corner, if you make a penalty for getting wiped off by the coach. In other words, there was a multitude of moments that could have resulted in a point deduction, yet he's the favored guy, he's the A side, he's the star. They did none of them. And by the way, if they had done even one of them, Lamont Roach wins the fight. He could have called a point deduction because he ruled a knockdown. He could have still then taken a second point for what happened in the corner. That would have given Lamont Roach even a greater margin of victory. Instead, he gets none of it. So he got totally screwed. I'm not saying Steve did it on purpose or had a dog in the race like Breadman said that he didn't. I don't think he did. I'm just saying he had a bad night, but that bad night cost Lamont Roach a second world championship. It cost him the glory of hanging the loss for the first time on the #1 American boxing star. It cost him revenge for 2 amateur losses. And oh, by the way, it cost him the chance to be a lightweight world champ. And for good measure, cost him most likely multi-millions of dollars in whatever would be negotiated for the second fight. So there's a lot of stuff that went bad, and it was all against Lamont Roach, unnecessarily. All you have to do is call a knockdown like you're trained to do, and you have seen in the ring thousands and thousands of times as an active referee as well as a person that has watched boxing for a good portion of your life.
You're right. But he did call the knockdown. He just stopped counting. And
you can't do that.
No,
that's one thing if like there's a reason like the guy quits and you're just waving off the fight, but you can't start the 8 count and not follow through with the rest of the 8 count. That's standard procedure.
Breadman, please, you're coming through the screen at me, buddy.
I have a question for Jack, Paulie, and Chris, because I know you guys are the most familiar with the New York State Athletic Commission. This missed call seems very obvious, right? So let's just say Steve made a mistake. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. What is like? I know things don't get overturned often, but why is it so hard to see what the obvious is and just do the right thing? Like, my question is it unprecedented in New York for something like this to be just overruled?
Well, I think that it's difficult to always go directly to the overruling because there's a lot of variables, right? But I'll give you my personal variable as well. There's something sinister here because the truck didn't send the replay. Now they make like it's a technical
That is not
problem.
true, Paulie. That is not true.
What? The truck didn't send the replay?
No, they did send the replay.
So why wasn't it? Why were all the articles in the media talking about that there was a technical issue and they couldn't send the replay? There's a New York Post article that says it today.
I can only speak from my own reporting. I've spoken to people that were in the truck, and I've spoken to people at the commission. I also know very well how the procedure works. And the reality is, I'm not going to tell you who, but I have screenshots of text messages back and forth from people that were involved in the entire situation. Here's what happened. Within seconds after the knockdown or non-knockdown, whatever you want to call it, occurred, they were sending the replay from the truck to the replay official, which is the alternate referee. And in this case, it was Ricky Gonzalez, who was a well-known New York referee.
There is a New York Post article today, in today's New York Post, saying that there was a technical issue with the replay and it was not sent.
Paulie, I wrote about the technical issue. Just because they sent it didn't mean that they received it. They ultimately did. It just took longer than the period of time that they had to conduct the replay.
Dan,
so here's
the moment of the whole fight, though, very convenient. But go ahead.
So you're talking about that time frame. Dan, do you remember Andrew Maloney and Joshua Franco when there was
Yeah,
the
that was in
headbutt-
Las Vegas. That was I'm still looking. They're looking for the headbutt. The way
it took
that
like
they're
30
looking for,
minutes. It was insane. I was calling the fight, and I couldn't believe how long they were taking to review.
Let me just tell you one thing about what happened here, though. It was the way it was explained to me by folks that were involved in the entire situation on the commission end of things, is that putting aside the incident in the main event, earlier in the night during undercard fights where there were boxers that suffered cuts, they requested replays from the truck to determine whether the punch or the headbutt caused the cut. And I was told that even during some of those undercard fights, they were having trouble accessing the replay after it was sent. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not an electrician. I don't know, or a computer science major. I'm not sure what the issue was, but the truck people said, absolutely, we not only sent the replay of what happened in the main event, but they confirmed it to us on the headset that, yes, thanks, guys, we got it. No punch, no knockdown. That was the initial ruling. I've got the screenshots to prove it. I've got receipts, as they say. And so there is a disconnect between what the truck people say and what the commission people say. Sinister, maybe, could be just a massive amount of miscommunication. I can't answer that question. But to think that they didn't send the replay is absolutely ridiculous, because that's the reason why the replay is able to occur, because the production people have access to the technology to assist the commission. They go over all of this beforehand. They make sure things are, that the people know who they're talking to. There are the replay officials right there at the ring apron.
I'm going to quote the New York Post article by Eric Richter. It's in today's New York Post. I'm going to quote, during the round in question, following the commission's request for the replay video, there was a technical issue preventing the commission from receiving it within the allotted time for review.
Okay, that is the statement that the
spokeswoman from the commission
I
said.
got the same statement, Paulie. It's in my article as well. Yep. The day before the New York Post published its piece. Here's the thing. They say that they sent it. And again, privately, I was told by people that were in the truck that they received a confirmation from the replay official. Thanks, guys, we got it. And so at that point, now the round comes to an end, and obviously they want to know what happened. I was told that one of the production people in the truck called back. Now they're having a headset. They can just push the button and talk to each other, and that they called back to the replay official to find out what the result was. And we're told yet again that they didn't make a call because no punch, no knockdown. And so at that point, that producer then or one of the producers anyway, I can't tell you which one it was, transmitted that information to Mauro Ranallo, who is the blow-by-blow person doing the commentary. And so if you go to 1 minute and 35 seconds remaining in round number 10, Mauro circles back to the incident from round 9 and reminds the audience, hey, by the way, I'm paraphrasing once again, by the way, remember what happened back there in round 9 with the incident with the knockdown, not knockdown. We are told that the replay official did not rule it a knockdown, and therefore they did not intervene. And so the call in the ring, which was Willis's call to abandon the count, stood. So somewhere there's a disconnect between what was going on at ringside and what was going on in the truck. But to suggest that they didn't send the replay is absolutely ridiculous.
One more part.
Paulie,
sorry, go ahead.
Let me respond to Paulie's question too. You guys brought me here not to comment on the ref. You brought me here for procedures and rules and regulations. So there are procedures in place when something like this happens and the fight ends and it's done. In most of the states that have quite a few fights in it, the small states that do 1 or 2 fights a year might not have this. But within 5 days, they file a protest and it gets brought before the commission. And the people filing the protest, go up, state their case. In New York, you got Matt Delaglio. Hey, Chris and Paulie is an Italian guy from Brooklyn, a straight shooter and a really good guy. He's no hanky-panky. He's going to do what's best for boxing. And they'll look at it, they'll review it, and they'll make a decision, based upon all the evidence.
One bookend here that I want to bring up that is part of the appeal that has been filed is Gervonta Davis said there was a substance in my hair that got in my eye. It caused a burning sensation. That's why I needed need to be toweled off by my corner man. It is illegal, according to the box rules, and Jack Reiss, please educate me if you know something different, to have anything on your body that could cause harm to either fighter. We all know about the famous Muhammad Ali-Sonny Liston fight. His eye started burning, and Angelo Dundee says, get up and dance. He didn't say take a knee. He didn't say stay on the stool. He knew his guy would get disqualified. So he was blind as a bat running around the ring. But this idea that afterward, Gervonta went, oh, my excuse was I had something in my hair that got in my eye. You're not allowed to have something in your hair that can burn your eyes. Jack Reiss, is there another way to look at this?
Yeah, 100%. So what you're saying is great. And I'll tell you procedurally, the way we operate, you're not allowed to have any kind of substance on you other than the approved substances, and they're all in the unified rules. Additionally, the equipment that you bring to the event, you're responsible for. If your shoes break, you don't have a, I'm just making this up, but if your shoes break and they're causing you a problem, it's on you. If he put that in his hair, it's on him. It's not something that the promoter or the commission provided. And it's the same thing with with Amanda Serrano. She canceled the fight because she had her hair done in a couple of days before and it irritated her eye. But procedurally, that's what it's supposed to be. Like if this glove rip, that was provided by the commission, they would address it, but not your equipment.
Yeah, I mean,
things like that.
Yeah, no, Jack, that's a good point. I mean, I fought with hair gel many fights in my career. It's your issue. But I'll say one thing: when something gets in your eye, you're like this. You're not like. Well, Gervonta's like this. Like, let me run to my. Now you're like this.
We get all the time. So what we get all the time is we have, boxing is a poor man's sport. And we get a lot of guys who come in as the opponent from other countries with a losing record, like you guys were describing, and they can hardly afford 2 mouthpieces. The regulation says they have to have 2. Well, we going to stop a fight over that? Yeah. No. And if it's not form fitted and it keeps coming out, we're going to work with them as best we can. Yeah. But these are real problems that exist in boxing.
Wait, Paul, you just brought up a good point, and I want everyone else to chime in on this too. Just the behavior of Gervonta, it didn't look like a guy who had something in his eye. He didn't react. You get something right.
You got something in your eye, but you're blinking. You're like even when you're like this, not like. You can see the replay for yourself. Gervonta's not blinking there was on his way to the corner.
A couple flickers after the punch and before he went down, but after that, I didn't see.
And if I can state, guys like Tony Tucker, Mitch Green, had soul glow in their hair when they fought. It was never an issue. Why does Gervonta get to make the issue?
Now, Breadman, as you said, it seems like the A side gets all of the leverage in situations like this. As a trainer, what do you think of his excuse? I had something in my hair. When you're not allowed to have something in your hair that can burn your eyes anyway.
You know what? I don't really want to get into his excuse because that's his excuse, and we don't. It's too hard to determine whether what really happened with his hair, what product was using. I don't like to get into that. What I saw was a knockdown, but I will tell you something. I looked at it about maybe 7 or 8 times to try to figure out what I saw really happening. And so here's what I saw. I saw Lamont Roach throw a right hand and Gervonta Davis kind of rubberneck it and turn his neck on the right hand. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if the right hand landed, but it was kind of like a grazing shot. He turned it. And then I seen Lamont Roach throw 2 flicking jabs. I saw one of the jabs touch Gervonta Davis's eye, but something that nobody else mentioned. And this is 100% Gervonta Davis's fault. This is the bottom line. I'm only answering the question. I think his plait got into his eye. He has braids in his hair, and I think the braids flicked into his eye, and it caused him some irritation. And nobody's saying
is that on the rubberneck? Is that on the turn on the right hand?
No, Paulie. After one of the jabs, if you look at it in the slow mo, there's an angle of it where it kind of where it's the camera zoomed in, and you can see that one of the braids flicks him in his eye. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not making excuses. It doesn't matter. Those are his braids. He's supposed to take care of them. But I think that's what really happened. The braids hit him in his eye, and it aggravated his eye, and it caused him.
Steve, that's a good point, man. That's a good point. I didn't get the call time out when I had to cut my hair, man. I had big ass braid problems.
Man, we said that yesterday in a meeting.
That's
still a knockdown. That's still a knockdown.
Here's the point. It's still a knockdown. It doesn't matter. Those are his braids. That's his hairstyle that he chose. I'm only answering it because we're talking about whether his eye really had grease in it and what really happened. One of his braids flicked him in the eye, but Gervonta, he should have just told. I'm not going to say should have told the truth, but if that's what really happened, he should have said my braids flicked in my eye. But he said the grease part, and nobody, people don't believe that. I've never even thought about believing it or not because it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's a knockdown regardless of what it was. But I think his braids aggravated his eye. If you look at it real close on the zoomed in angle, a braid flicked him right in his eye after he was jabbed, and I think that's what caused the irritation.
And that caused him to take a knee, and therefore it's a knockdown.
But why 100% right. Where does Calvin Ford come in with the towel, though? I mean, either way. I mean, what is the towel going to do? It's not grease.
You know what, Paul?
Is he excusing Calvin coming up to? Is that why he said grease? Because he's excusing Calvin coming up to the ring apron? Go ahead.
Paul, let me say this part about Calvin Ford coming up. You've done a lot of my guys' fights. I talk loud. There's been times where I've got out of my seat just to like see a better angle because they'll have somebody with a camera and they want that guy to get a better angle than I am, and I'm the head trainer. So I'll move my seat just to get a better angle, just so I can call the fight from my guy, and somebody from the commission will grab my shoulder and tell me to sit down. Why did the commission allow Calvin Ford to walk up there with his towel like that? Somebody should have stopped him and said, "You're not allowed to do this."
Breadman, with all due respect, it happened so fast. I don't think anybody was close.
You know what,
to
Jack? That's a fair excuse. It does, but guess what?
It's not,
They
it's
grabbed
not
me when I
regular.
just
It's
yelled.
not normal behavior. So
Okay.
no one was expecting it.
Okay.
By the way, I think the
can buy
reason
that.
why I think Calvin knows the rules. He came up the steps because Gervonta stuck his head between the ropes and was shouting at him to come up the steps. So he was following the request of his fighter,
And I think that's
even
why,
if he probably knows it's against the rules.
And to go back to what Brett said, I think that's why in the post-fight press conference, Gervonta's saying it was grease, because now you have to have an excuse for why Calvin came up on the ring apron. Because if your braid hits you, that's not an excuse to have a towel rubbed on you, because that's not going to do anything. But if you have grease in your eye, then it's an excuse, at least, even if it's wrong, you can make the excuse of why Calvin came up on the ring apron. It's possible why he said that.
Speaking of the corner, Chris, you pointed it out when we were discussing this fight. You said there was a lot of arguing in the corner. It was a very contentious corner. Tank was yelling at his guys a lot. When Tank went back to his corner man, and you catch it on audio, says, Tank, that looked like submission. Let's take a look at it and take a listen as well.
Through 9 rounds, Roach outlanding Davis.
That looked like a submission.
You guys calm down.
Hey, come on now.
That looked like submission. That's what his corner said. And Chris, as you pointed out, it was a contentious corner. Tank kind of going after his guys. But this idea that his corner was responding to what he said, hey, come wipe my face off. A lot of cornermen, Breadman, as you point out, would go, no, you're going to get disqualified. Right. But it seemed like he was in conflict with his corner a lot.
Yeah, he was already barking orders at them earlier in the round. He was actually doing it to Steve Willis earlier in the fight as well. They had some moments where they came together, and Tank was speaking quite a bit. He was speaking throughout the bout, but exactly to your point, Jimmy, the reason that Calvin Ford jumped up is because he was being told to by his guy, who obviously was in an uncomfortable position and had been for a few rounds.
And
fellas, procedurally, just to add to what you guys are saying, when a trainer comes up on the apron, it could be one of the signs of that he wants the fight stopped as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's what Dan said that with the white towel.
Yeah. He's holding the white towel. My first thought is the guy comes up the steps holding a white towel, fight's over. He's throwing in the towel.
That's in the rules. That's what you're supposed to do. Come up on the steps and whatever if you want the fight stopped.
My very first impression was I thought Tank forgot his mouthpiece. I thought he was fighting the round without his mouthpiece and realized it because the way he went to the corner was really difficult to see what was going on from my vantage point. I wasn't watching it on TV. I was there live. I couldn't hear what the broadcasters were saying. So it was a very confusing turn of events that was going on in that corner.
Well, Chris, Abner Mares, who was doing the commentary, he started to say that exact thing that you could tell he thought that it was a mouthpiece, and then he quickly abandoned that line because we saw him run right back without having to have a mouthpiece put into his mouth.
Yeah, there was no body language.
With all due respect to you guys, if the round started and Tank realized he didn't have his mouthpiece and ran over to the corner and Calvin jumped up and put it in, nobody'd be saying shit right now.
Yeah, you're right.
But you still gotta. I don't know, bro.
I'm just saying. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in boxing.
I don't know, bro. I don't know if I agree with that, Jack. I mean, you can't. I've seen mouthpiece guys come out with no mouthpiece, and I've seen corners yell, and I've seen the fighter tell the referee once the round started, "Yo, I got no mouthpiece," and the referee will then call a timeout. You still gotta wait for that timeout from the ref, dude. You still protect yourself at that time.
It happens all the time.
I've seen both types.
Common sense has to rule. If the guy's coming up on the ring apron for a reason to make, because if a round is not supposed to ever start without the mouthpiece.
Yeah.
If they recognize it before the ref, what are you going to do? Disqualify him?
Either way, the issue is not the mouthpiece. If my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle. We're not talking about that. We're talking about whether he's taking a knee or not. Yeah, of course.
Paulie, I'm saying there's intent. One was to help the fighter in your guys' eyes. One is to abide by the rules and help the whole fight. There's a difference.
If I can summarize, and Dan, Breadman, I would love your opinions about this. If I can summarize, Jack, I really appreciate your input. You've done a great job explaining the rules to us. And what you've said over and over is, well, that's a judgment call. That's a judgment call. The referee has a lot of discretion. As an outsider, and I'm the most outsider one here when it comes to boxing, called a lot of boxing, all of you guys much deeper than I am in the boxing world, it seemed like all the decisions went to Tank. 3 or 4 in a row. Each
that
one.
goes back to what Brad was saying.
Right, each one.
The A side.
Right, each one, Jack, you can say he has discretion, he has discretion. Dan, I want to ask you first. It seemed as though there were 3 or 4 judgments that all went in the same way. That's where the injustice comes from to me as a fan from the outside. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. I've been saying there were moments throughout that entire sequence where Willis could have called a knockdown. There's a point. He didn't do it. Okay, fine. Could have called the point when he ran to the corner. Didn't do it. That would have been a point that would have given Lamont the margin of victory. Could have done the same thing in terms of Calvin coming up the steps. It could have done a multitude of things to penalize Tank Davis at least once. And of the 3 or 4 or 5 different things that could have been done, Willis did none of them. All he had to do was one of them, and Roach is the winner of the fight. What he should have done is call the knockdown, and that would have been the end of it.
Breadman, as a trainer, I know your heart is invested in when your guys, you said you've been in big fights as a trainer of the B side. To have a situation like this where it seems like the discretion always went to the A side, what's your thought on it as a trainer, man?
It sucks. You know, even swing rounds, you know, you look at a fight and you say, you know what? I think we may have gotten that one. And then you look up and the score is 116, 112, or 117, 111. And all of the swing rounds.
Brad, that's a great point.
Swing rounds go to the A side. It's happened to us all the time. It's tough. Karan Davis, for example, fought Elijah Garcia last year in June on the Tank Frank Martin card. Karan won that fight going away. Two judges gave him the fight, maybe 98-92. There was one judge, Judge John McKay. He gave Elijah Garcia the fight 98-92. Elijah Garcia's father knew he lost the fight and hugged me afterwards. And I'm just looking like, how does this happen? It always goes to the A side. Yeah. So that's the part that's it's
to your point.
I don't even know the word. It's just disappointing to me that it always happened. Tyson Fury and Usyk is another example. I know everybody watched their first fight. Fury bounces off the ropes 4 times. The referee decides to call the knockdown when he's helpless in the corner when Usyk is about to knock him out. Say, okay, I'm going to call a knockdown here to give him a little bit of time. Well, you could have called the knockdown the 4 times that it happened before there, because if the rope holding you up is a knockdown, don't pick the one where the guy is most helpless and he's about to get stopped. It always happens, and that's frustrating.
Brad, can I teach you guys something?
Please.
Listen, you want to know what a knockdown is on the ropes? It's not a horizontal motion. It's a vertical motion. Getting knocked back to the ropes, and the ropes stop you from going 10 rows into the audience, and you still got your legs under. That's not a knockdown. It's when you're dropping vertically and your ass is past the heels of your feet, where you're past the point of no return. And that's why he called that 4th one the knockdown, because at that point, there was no way Tyson wasn't going to hit the ground without those ropes helping him. So with all due respect, that's what a lot of people don't understand. A knockdown on the ropes is a vertical motion, not horizontal. You can get knocked across the ring on the ropes, and if your legs are still straight and they're under you, you're not going down. You're going across.
Well, I'll tell you what, that ruling there, going back to what Brett was saying, is a 3-point swing, because 2 judges actually gave Gervonta Davis that round. Right. So that goes from 10-9. If that's a knockdown, the way it should be called, it goes from 10-9 Gervonta on those 2 cards to 10-8 for Lamont Roach. That's a 3-point swing on those 2 scorecards.
It wins by unanimous decision. All 3 judges.
That's a people act like the official result is not important, but it is. If Golovkin gets the official result on the first Canelo fight, things change for his career. Mm-hmm. If Lamont Roach gets that call, things change for his career. The official result is a very, very big deal. I remember Paulie fought Juan Diaz. He had to fight him twice because he didn't get the correct official result. So people can minimize that. But when you're the B side of a fight and you need that result to move your career forward, as Lamont Roach does, he needs the official result to say a win for him. And I don't have a horse in the race, but he does. And that's the part that sucks for him, that he doesn't have the official result of a win over a top pound for pound and the top American star. And I still think Gervonta Davis is a great fighter. He's a tremendous fighter to me. But if you being the first person to beat him is a feather in your cap. And Lamont Roach doesn't have that. So it does suck for the kid that he fought his heart out and he didn't get the victory that most people think he deserved.
You know,
Breadman, it's not just a feather in his cap; it's multi-millions of dollars in his bank account, more than he.
Oh, that's another thing.
That's a lot of
more
feathers.
important than feathers and caps. Let me tell you.
And Breadman, a little bit to your point, but also, you know, kind of referring to something that Dan spoke about on his podcast. Usually, when there's controversies, we're talking about judging. The judges actually did a good job in this fight. And the only reason that we're really talking about this controversy is because how well Lamont Roach fought and was actually in this fight. Listen, if Gervonta was winning by a wide margin and this occurred, we wouldn't be here right here. Now, the fact that the fight was actually very good and Lamont put up such a great performance where a lot of people had him winning regardless of the knockdown is why we're actually here talking about this.
It's very true. And Breadman, I appreciate you. You've wrapped up kind of the injustice of the situation so well. I want to thank my experts joining us, Jack Reiss, Dan Rafael. Breadman, you have been fantastic. Thank you so much for educating us and our audience. Thank you so much for your time here at the table. ProBox TV, before we go, last thoughts on this. What would you like to see here at the table? Paulie, let me start with you.
I want to see a rematch. I think, and I concur with Dan Rafael. You know, a win taken away from Lamont Roach in such a big moment changes so many things. He deserves this win, and I feel like they took it from him.
Chris,
rematch in Brooklyn. Let's run it back. I want to see it again. I was there. It was
Brooklyn.
The energy was great in there.
What about Vegas? Less taxes.
Well, that's
Brooklyn,
that's a good point.
scene of the crime. Go back to it and
They take a lot of taxes in New York.
Yeah, I want the justice in the room.
Well, thank you. Justice in the same state would be absolutely fantastic. Don't forget Lamont Roach Jr. joining us later in the week to discuss this fight, his thoughts on it, his emotions, his feelings. It's all right here on ProBox TV. Find out when millions are watching.